Says Chandler. I will call to order our January 27th Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and we will begin our agenda by adopting our agenda. Do we have any modifications or corrections to the agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve? We have a motion from Mr. Evangelista. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Next, we need to approve the minutes for a couple meetings. First of all, the December 9th work session minutes. Do we have any corrections? Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. And then finally, we have December 16th regular meeting minutes. Do we have any corrections? Seeing none, can we have a motion?
I move that we approve the December 16th meeting minutes.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries unanimously. And now we're going to move into our public hearings. And before we step into that, I want to provide a little background on how we work our process. We will start with a staff presentation, which Ms. Chandler is preparing to do at the podium to your right, to my left. That will be followed by a presentation by the applicant, which we will limit to 10 minutes. And at that point in time, I will open the public hearing, and we will be available to take comments from anyone present that is interested. I'm going to ask that you address any comments you have to the entire board. Don't please try to talk to just one of us. Don't be surprised if we don't ask you questions. It's our opportunity to listen, not to talk to you. If you have multiple people here with the same interest, perhaps you can pick a spokesman, because hearing the same thing over and over again doesn't really provide additional information for us. And you will notice there's a little black box on the podium. When you begin, that box will have a green light on it. That light will stay green for the first 4.5 minutes of your comments. At 4.5 minutes, an orange light is going to come on, indicating you have 30 seconds remaining. At the end of that 30 seconds, the light will turn red, and at that point in time, to be fair to other speakers, I'm going to ask you to conclude your comments. That said, we're going to begin with our first public hearing, and this is 13 CPA 15. It's a Weston PDD amendment. Ms. Chandler?
Thank you. Good evening. This case is a comprehensive plan amendment request for about 25 acres in the Weston area. The subject property is located on the line between Cary and Mooresville. On this slide, you'll see the golden color is Cary town limits. The white space is Mooresville, and the green striped area is Cary's ETJ, or extraterritorial jurisdiction. The subject property is located on the south side of Weston Parkway between Chapel Hill Road and Sheldon Drive. Notification of this plan amendment request was sent to properties shown in yellow on this map. This slide shows stream buffers within and around the property. And the slide shows a proposed greenway near the subject property. Both Weston Parkway and Chapel Hill Road are existing major thoroughfares. And C-Tran has a future route planned in this area as well. As per the Town of Cary land use plan, the current land use designation for the subject property is office industrial. The applicant proposes to change the land use designation to office industrial or medium density residential. Medium density residential includes dwelling densities at 3 to 8 units per acre. At the Town Council public hearing earlier this month, no citizens came forward to speak. Council asked how much office space might be developed on the subject property, and the applicant responded that 70 to 80,000 square feet of office development could potentially fit on the property. Town Council also requested the current and proposed amount of office square footage in the Weston area. Nearly 2 million square feet of office floor space exists in the Weston PDD today, and an additional 450,000 square feet of office development is approved but not yet constructed. One council member also noted that medium density residential could be an acceptable use for this property, and additional details could be discussed as part of the associated rezoning case. Either an office industrial or a medium density residential land use could provide an appropriate transition to immediately adjacent development, as well as to the larger Weston area. If we're looking at the site specifically, natural features such as stream buffers or variant topography are both an opportunity to enjoy a naturally wooded setting and a constraint while site planning and developing such a property. If we're looking at the Weston area, this is a 900-plus acre planned development with 3/4 of the land originally identified for non-residential development, primarily office and light industry. The town's land use plan describes office parks and office industrial parks as planned concentrations of office and industrial development. Over the last decade, this model of mostly single-use office has transitioned due to market demand for a more mixed-use environment. If we're looking at the property town-wide, this area is very well located and connected to the Triangle region and is adjacent to I-40, and it is also less than half a mile walk to Park West Village, the 100-plus acre fairly new development in Mooresville. This shows the Weston Plan Development District Master Plan. Over the past decade, various properties have changed from office to residential uses, and you can see these properties labeled as LDR for low density residential, MDR medium density residential, and HDR for high density residential. So they're sort of nicely spread out throughout the area. The Land Development Ordinance sets out 4 criteria to consider when determining whether or not a comprehensive plan amendment is necessary. Staff believes that the change in projections or assumptions, as well as the new issues, needs, or opportunities items, are met by this request. Staff recommends approval of this request. And following the public hearing, the Planning and Zoning Board may make a recommendation to Town Council on this case. At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant up to make a presentation.
In just a matter of process, I think I indicated earlier that I would start the public hearing after the applicant's comments. Actually, I think we've decided to revise the process, so I open the public hearing at this point. And so I will formally open the public hearing, and
Okay.
now we will hear from the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bob Zumwalt. I'm with McAdams, and I'm director of our planning and design group. I'm here tonight representing MI Homes and Highwoods Properties in their effort to amend the PDD, as Meredith suggested, to allow a portion of this to have medium-density residential as a potential development opportunity here. While it's not part of the hearing tonight, our current planning is for a maximum of 100 townhomes with a central recreation amenity, just so you know kind of what we're thinking, not part of what you're looking at tonight. Weston, as you mentioned, is a 929-acre master plan community that combines predominantly non-residential land uses with some common open space. The purpose of the amendment is to convert 25 acres of this tract of this PDD from office and industrial to residential. The development of this tract as medium-density residential would sort of help transition Weston from a traditionally suburban office park development into a more mixed-use environment. Since the adoption of the land use plan in Cary in '96, planning principles have continued to evolve over that time to support a more integrated mix of uses. Current planning practices strive for more sustainable communities that are less dependent on automobiles and provide a mix of housing types in proximity to employment centers and retail centers and restaurants. As Meredith mentioned, we're about a half mile from Park West Village, which has a lot of these amenities. The requested amendment would be consistent with these practices. Since its inception in '98, the density of office in Weston has increased above what it was originally envisioned by Highwoods. The original draft of the PUD didn't include any residential, but over time, as Meredith mentioned, there have been a number of amendments that have added residential in portions of the PDD to respond to the demand for housing in and around this big employment center that's Weston. This amendment would additionally provide additionally reasonably priced housing in close proximity to these jobs. And the site is encumbered by some difficult environmental features, and it does have virtually no visibility from Weston Parkway, so it has been difficult to develop as an office site. And conversely, some of those same features work well for a residential site. Due to these significant natural features surrounding the site, the conversion of office to residential won't detract from the integrity of the Weston PDD as you're driving down Weston Parkway. In fact, the dense surroundings will provide sort of a buffered, secluded enclave for people who might work in the Weston area to live. As I mentioned, the density of Weston has increased greatly in conjunction with the demand for corporations to locate in Weston. Recent developments have also incorporated the use of structured parking, which has allowed them to increase the density of office in the park. This trend is likely to continue as the price for land continues to go up in Weston. Highwoods estimates that their holdings alone in the Weston development are capable of accommodating 1.2 million square feet of office space in addition to what exists today. At the current pace that the park is developing, it would take close to 20 years to fully build out the remaining available office land in Weston. At full build out, Highwoods holdings could contain 2 million square feet of office and be home to approximately 10,000 employees and their families. Without adequate housing opportunities nearby, the transportation network will have to handle all these trips in and out of Weston and be forced to commute from neighborhoods outside of Cary or Morrisville. We believe the proposal before you tonight will further Weston's transition to a more sustainable mixed-use PDD, which provides housing opportunities of varying prices and price points in close proximity to this large employment center. Finally, in addition to the stream features present on the site on either side that you saw in one of those slides, the property contains quite a bit of topography, making the development of it for an office very difficult. The site generally slopes from the southern end of the site toward Weston Parkway, kind of off toward the creeks, and there is anywhere from 60 to 70 feet of topo falling from the south down to the creeks. An office use of this location would require a lot of earthwork and a lot of retaining walls, whereas a residential use with a good land plan, you could take advantage of this topography by using things like daylight basements, things that you can do in a residential setting you can't do in an office setting. This issue was spoken about briefly at the council meeting as well. With that, we appreciate your time, and we're here to answer any questions. Thanks.
And now, do we have anyone else that would like to address us on this case? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, I believe we can close the public hearing and open this case up for board discussion. Questions?
I have one. Ms. Chandler, just to clarify, by adding the medium-density residential use, this parcel could develop as all office or all medium-density residential or some mix, is that correct? According to the land use plan, if it were
That's
approved?
correct.
Thank you.
So that would basically be it's MDR and office institutional. It doesn't have to be one or the other, it could be a mix.
It could be,
Okay, can you go back to slide 16?
certainly.
I think that is the one, yeah, that's the one. The number of LDR, HDR already here. How many residential units are already built?
I don't have the count. We looked at the area as far as when it started out, a small percentage was set aside for open space, and now looking at it, about a third of it is residential, or a third of the acreage is residential. But I do not have the number. That's something I could get for you.
And do we know the percentage or the number of people who who live in this area, who also work in the area?
No, we don't have that information. That would be an interesting thing to find out.
It would be. I've heard twice in the presentations, you and the applicant mentioned that it's a half mile from Park West. That's a half mile, I presume, walking. How would you go there by walking?
This slide, called Town Limits, has the best view of where Park West Village is. If you look where the site is, immediately south of it is an existing multifamily residential development that's in the Morrisville town limits. There is a street stub in that development that goes up to the south end of the subject property. When I measured from that point to the intersection of Chapel Hill Road and Northwest Cary Parkway on the right side of the Park West Village label, that was about 1/3 of a mile. I traced where someone might walk. I guess you could potentially drive the same route as well, depending on how connections work out.
So that would be cutting through the Marquee apartment complex.
Right, that's, street
And
stub
then-
was the closest route.
Right, and then down Northwest Cary
To
Parkway
Cary
to
Parkway.
Park West. So it's not a crow flies type measurement, it's actual.
It was the
village
actual walking path or driving path.
walk.
John, can
Okay,
I do a follow-up on that?
certainly.
This presents kind of an interesting opportunity for us to coordinate with Morrisville, our partners in Morrisville. Do we know whether Morrisville has a plan that is going to include either sidewalks or street or trails, street-side trails, that would provide easy connectivity from this site down to Park West?
I don't have that information. That's something we could check on or contact the Morrisville Planning Department about if there isn't already something there.
It might be a good idea because, there could be a group just like us in Morrisville that are looking at that parcel right to the south right now, not really aware of the fact that we're looking at this site, and they could be planning something that could be synergistic or
Certainly.
could be an obstruction. So I'm going to encourage you to do that.
Okay, certainly. Great suggestion.
Do we have other questions? Mr. Rogers?
While we're talking about capability of walking, in this Section D Comprehensive Transportation Plan, we talk about sidewalks. And it said the original Western PDD had a sidewalk waiver in lieu of a greenway system that was to be built. That system was never completely installed. As a result, sidewalks are required on both sides. So I'm sort of trying to figure out what this means. Does this mean that only for this site, you're going to put sidewalks in? We're going to put sidewalks in? We're going to put sidewalks in all the way to Chapel Hill Road? Because it sounds as if there are none between this site and Chapel Hill Road.
That's something that would be determined at the time of site plan. I mean, typically we'll do whatever we can to get a good pedestrian circulation network, and I don't know. You have anything you'd like to add?
I might be able to. Do you have that aerial? It shows us.
Yes, we do.
Whatever the
Six.
closest one is. One of the things I'll just mention, again, not part of what we're talking about tonight, but in our PDD amendment, we are going to provide pedestrian stubs to both the east and west. And although the scale is pretty small, there's sidewalks that go across the front of the two buildings you see there along Weston on the corner that can take you, there you go. So we're going to try to connect up to the sidewalk in front of that building that takes you straight across the front of the two buildings and then out via sidewalk to Chapel Hill Road. And there's sidewalks on Chapel Hill Road that can take you down to Weston. So we're thinking about it, and we're trying to figure out some ways to make a better connection. Because while we will connect, as Meredith said, to the back of that apartment complex, again, it's a private landowner, and so we're trying to think of different ways to try to accommodate that pedestrian traffic. So,
Appreciate the
yeah,
input.
sure.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, can we have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward case number 13-CPA-05 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval to amend the land use plan as proposed.
I'll second.
Motion and second discussion.
Mr. Chairman, the reason for making the motion is that I see this as a good fit, given the vast amount of office space. It would seem reasonable in the sense that the city is trying to create some more mixed-use opportunities to cut down on traffic, et cetera. And given the fact that there's already a substantial construction down the road with the MetLife that's going to bring in quite a few new employees to that area, it would seem to be a good fit, not to mention the fact that the topography of the site is more conducive to residential, as the applicant said, than office. And also, just going down Weston Parkway, it appeared to me that there are just numerous signs for office space that is available for lease, leaving me the impression that there's probably more office space in that area, that's not being used, and adding more probably wouldn't help the situation that much. So for those reasons, I recommend that we should move for approval.
Other comments?
Yes, I agree with some of the positives of this, and particularly the possibility of pedestrian connectivity. And I do say possibility. I am concerned with the amount of traffic. I'd really like to know of all the apartments, and there are apartments, because we have approved some and there's some existing, and other apartments, condos, and other housing, residential housing along Weston Parkway. How much of that actually works on Weston Parkway, and how much of it produces traffic which drives somewhere else and uses other roads? But I am concerned about the traffic and possibility of increasing traffic on Weston Parkway. Another concern, I like the idea of it being able to walk, and I have measured it, and the distance, walking distance from the very corner of this property, not the middle of it or anything, but the very corner to the very first building within Park West, actually going down to the building. And it is, I think, for me at least, and if I can walk it, anybody can. However, I drive by there all the time, and in fact, today was the first time I ever saw anybody walking along there, actually crossing the road. I would like to know how many people in Marquee, which would be closer, actually go to Park West walking as opposed to driving. I've seen people driving, but not walking. But my objection to it, the reasons I would support it, I think have already been mentioned. John mentioned them. The topography, if it's done right, I think could work out. And the fact that it does have the potential for walkability if that is actually used. But I am concerned about the traffic, and so I'm more leaning towards opposing it, although there are plenty of reasons to support it as well.
Other questions? John, in response, I would point out that had this developed office rather than residential, I expect the traffic impact might have been as great, if not considerably greater. So we may be actually netting down in terms of traffic load by making this residential.
I was just going to add, it was pretty important to us to understand that we could get access to this property off of Weston. So while it wasn't part of this, we've actually done a full traffic study just to meet with the staff to understand how we could get access. And it is actually less traffic as residential, the way we're proposing it, than as office. And you won't see that till you get to the zoning, but I just wanted to mention that so you understand.
Hearing no other comments, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I think that's, you voted for it, John, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
Unanimous.
So we're going to move on to our next public hearing, and this is 13 REZ 21 Weldon Ridge PDD Amendment. Ms. Grannon?
Thank you. Good evening. This is a request made by the property owners of approximately 21.5 acres located at Lazy D Drive. It's an assemblage of 2 lots. You can see it here highlighted in yellow. The subject property is landlocked, but in close proximity to Morrisville Parkway and Weldon Ridge Boulevard. Close-up aerial view shows that the subject property is developed with detached residential and accessory buildings. Access is currently provided to it from an easement along Lazy D Drive. The subject property is located in the southwest area plan and has a designation of conservation low density. And the existing zoning is Wake County Residential 40. This is a map showing you the previously approved Forest Oaks subdivision, which was later renamed to the Weldon Ridge subdivision, and the subject property is located here. The applicant is proposing to bring this land into the Weldon Ridge PDD, and they would like to introduce this as Tract SF10. An overview of the proposal is that this new tract would include the 21.56 acres. There would be a maximum density of 2 dwelling units per acre, a maximum of 43 detached residential dwelling units, a minimum lot size of 11,000 square feet, and a minimum of 1 acre of open space, additional open space. Since this was initially presented to the town council, the applicant has added some language to the PDD that states that if and when developed, it would be according to the Conservation Residential Overlay District standards in the Land Development Ordinance. And because of that additional language, that's why there's another public hearing this evening. And this shows you the close-up view of the proposed tract. Details of the conditions are within the staff report and also include a 20-foot Type B perimeter buffer shown here in green. Property owners within 400 feet of the subject property were notified by the request. There were no inquiries from adjacent property owners and no speakers at the town council public hearing. The site is impacted slightly by a stream buffer according to our recent GIS maps, and field determination of such features would be required at the time of site plan review. There are no issues with the Parks Greenways master plan, no greenway trails in immediate vicinity of the subject property. a recreation payment in lieu of a land dedication would be required at the time of site plan review. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the subject property is landlocked. It does not have frontage on a public road. And at this time, I would like to ask the applicant to come forward and present their request. And then staff is available following the public hearing for your questions.
Thank you. At this point, I will open the public hearing, and we will begin with our applicant presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. My name is Glenda Top with Glenda Top and Associates. I'm here tonight representing the owners of the property. Staff has done an excellent job going over the proposed PDD amendment. I will be short. We are in compliance with the Southwest Area Plan. We added the condition that we will comply with the Conservation Overlay District for the property. We are within the required density. These are large lots. It was envisioned that this piece of property would eventually come into the Weldon Ridge PDD. We met with the adjacent property owners, and I am here, as is the engineer on the project, to answer any questions, and we ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to address us on this case? Anyone at all? Seeing no one approach the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing and open this case for discussion. Questions?
Yes, the traffic on this, and other connections to Weldon Ridge at both ends. What would become of Lazy D Drive? Is it expected to be used as access to the site?
That's actually part of the Weldon Ridge subdivision, this area, so I don't have a site plan for that yet. That's something that we'd have to look at the time of site plan, but the property is all part of the development.
Okay.
Other questions? Seeing none, can we have a motion, please?
I'll move that we forward case number 13 REZ 21, the Weldon Ridge PDD amendment,
And I will...
to town council with a recommendation for approval, as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans, and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Okay, Mr. Shaw, now
I'll
it's your
second.
turn. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries unanimously. And we will move to our next case, which is 13 REZ 23, Indian Wells Road Properties. Ms. Granite again.
Thank you. This is a request to rezone approximately 29.45 acres from residential 40 to residential 8 conditional use. Subject property shown highlighted here in yellow is on both the north and south side of Indian Wells Road. It's an assemblage of 6 separate lots. Some of the property is vacant, and several of the lots are developed with detached residential. The land use plan designation of the property is medium-density residential, and there is also a swath of land with a dedication of parks and open space, shown here in green. The existing zoning is residential 40. The applicant has proposed a zoning of residential 8 conditional use. At the Town Council public hearing, the applicant proposed to limit the use to detached residential, set a maximum density of 3 dwelling units per acre, and provide a 20-foot wide perimeter buffer in common open space along the western property line. Property owners within 400 feet of the subject property were notified of the request. The property was posted and advertised. There were no protest petitions. There were questions from adjacent property owners regarding potential impacts at the time of development, how the road would be extended, how wells and septic tanks would be protected, environmental concerns, construction noise, light, things of that nature. There was one citizen who contacted staff. We put them in contact with the applicant, and the applicant has advised that they have been in frequent contact with this citizen. At the public hearing, there were concerns expressed by neighbors in the adjacent Cameron Pond subdivision. There was a lot of concern expressed about buffers and tree protection. There was a concern expressed about recent tree clearing that was reported in the vicinity, and staff conducted some research and responded to the town council's question about some recent tree clearing that was associated with installation of a new sewer line that was intended to serve the Cameron Pond subdivision. So while some of it, the tree clearing was taking place on the subject property, it was for that utility line, that utility easement. Since the town council public hearing, in response to some of the concerns about tree protection and buffer protection, the applicant added a condition, revised their condition about that 20-foot perimeter buffer, and offered a condition that they would provide a minimum of 1.5 acres of open space with disturbances only as permitted by the LDO. So there could be no construction, no building in that area, but there could be disturbances if there was a utility line crossing or the need for a road crossing at some point. They also added a condition that the areas not designated as permanent open space would have a minimum density of 3 dwelling units per acre so that they could ensure compliance with the comprehensive plan. And here is an exhibit provided by the applicant that showed some of the required open space in the light green color where stream buffers are located, and then in the darker green shows the area where they would provide additional non-regulatory open space. As shown on this map, the site is impacted by stream buffers. Once again, field determination is required at the time of site plan review. The site is also impacted, according to Cary's Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Master Plan, by both proposed street side trails and greenway trails, as shown in green and blue on this map. And this shows the proximity of the subject property to Indian Wells and Wakena, which are designated as collector roadways. There's also a future collector roadway that runs north and south through the subject property, a proposed collector. The closest transit route is the Triangle Transit Route on NC 55. And at this time, this concludes staff's presentation. I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward and make their presentation, and then we're both available for your questions following the public hearing.
Thank you. At this point, I'll open the public hearing, and we will enjoy a conversation from the applicant to begin.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Adam Ashbaugh. I am a partner with L-Star Land Management here in Raleigh, and we are the applicant for the project. This rezoning request, what we tried to do here, if you look really at the land use plan, what we did is we looked at this, the context of this property in relation to that entire MDR, medium density residential area, all the way from Highway 55 back to the Cameron Pond development to the west. And a couple things, you know, again, this is both on the future land use map and the Northwest Area Plan identified as medium density residential. But based upon feedback from the neighboring property owners and also an evaluation of these natural features that Deborah mentioned, the stream buffers and the parks and open space designation on that site, we concluded really that the best plan for development of this area was to create a transition of density from a higher density out at 55, which is property that's not before you today, but looking at this medium density residential, a range of 3 units to the acre to 8 units to the acre. It seemed to us that the 3 dwelling units to the acre was better at that western edge, again, abutting those natural features, abutting the Cameron Pond property. And so that's what we've tried to do with our request, trying to be respectful of those things, and that's where that condition came of offering that 3 units per acre condition. We also heard the concerns that were raised at that public hearing by the Cameron Pond residents. We have since met with them one additional time after the public hearing, and we agree that, you know, one, that piece of property over there is not easily accessible by either roads or those kinds of things. So it was prudent in our mind to offer that additional condition to set that 1.5 acre minimum aside for permanent open space. So with those additional conditions, and with this application as a whole, we feel that we've met the 6 criteria for consideration of a rezoning approval, and we respectfully request your support and your recommendation to Town Council. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to address us on this case? Please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Balu Ambari, one of the residents of Cameron Pond. I spoke to all of you a couple of weeks back at the prior hearing. After we met with the applicant, the residents who are staying kind of close to the proposed applicant's changes, we are in support of this development behind us. The only request to the planning department is to try to hook in the sewer line from the opposite side, if that's possible, instead of tying into the Cameron Pond sewer line, existing sewer line. But applicants tells us that that's not in their control, it's in the city's control. So that's just a request from the Cameron Pond community to the city planning department. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Ethan Otkin. I'm also a homeowner in Cameron Pond. I'm one of the affected homeowners. You know, with you can't really control any tree clearing that happens outside your property. There was an easement behind our properties that was for the last phase of Cameron Pond. Looking at maps and everything, it was supposed to be, I think, around 35 feet. They ended up clearing about 46 feet, and I actually brought an email, which I'd be glad to forward on to the planning committee or anything else, that shows the path of trees that was cut. And there's a very thin line of trees that remains. So that's why we were a little concerned, or some of us were very concerned about what would happen with this development. However, L-Star's been very good about working with us, and definitely adding this condition of creating permanent open space is, you know, it goes a long way towards winning our support. And in fact, today I can go ahead and support this development. I think, you know, they've chosen the right mix where we have 3 acres, three units per acre. And you know, as long as we can get that open space behind our properties, we definitely support this development. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address us? Seeing no one approach the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing and open this case for discussion. Questions? Mr. Warner, or he had his hand up.
What is the density of the Cameron Woods subdivision?
Cameron Pond?
Pond Road?
It's a planned development district. It's got different tracks in it. It varies in terms of minimum lot size from required 9,000 square foot lot size on the southern portion, and then the northern portions had a minimum requirement of 7,000 square feet per acre. In actual practice, the lots are larger than the minimums, so they vary in size from 8,000 square feet up to as much as 15,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Muir, you were next.
Right. How does that portion of open space that's being dedicated compare to the requirements for open space on this parcel?
It would exceed the open space requirements. So required open space there's actually no perimeter buffer requirement, because when you have two Class 2 land uses abutting each other, there's a requirement for a planting strip, a 20-foot planting strip, but that can be contained within lots. So this would actually be common open space dedicated to the future HOA. So it's easier to control because it's in control and management of an association rather than individual lot owners.
The questions?
Yes. I believe there's some construction work now, or clearing on Wakena Road. So there is some additional development along Wakena Road.
That's a separate project.
Yeah, it's a separate project.
Right.
But there's additional going on Wakena Road. I do have a traffic question for Mr. Jensen or whoever would handle it. Is there any improvement planned for the Indian Wells NC55 intersection?
Currently, right now, there is an improvement being done by Parkside Town Commons. It was part of their plan approval. They're going to be lengthening the left turn lane going southbound on Highway 55, and they'll be adding another separate right turn lane on Morrisville Carpenter Road going westbound. So there'll be a 3-lane approach. So that will be an improvement they're making, as well as they're also adding at Carpenter Fire Station Road, they're adding double left turn lanes going northbound to turn west onto Carpenter Fire Station Road. That's part of their project. And there's a little bit of widening also they're doing on northbound Highway 55. But that's the only thing currently right now, as well as the town's bond project, which is to realign Carpenter Fire Station Road, which is currently going through the environmental document right now.
But anything that would improve the flow of traffic from Indian Wells onto or across?
Nothing the town has, no. It's predominantly as the area shows signs of redevelopment. A lot of those improvements to those local roads will be done by development as it occurs. We do have one major north-south collector street, which is Highcroft Drive, which is on that blue line that you see further to the west. That's forming some shape right now. As Fire Development is building part of theirs right now, so that collector road is taking shape right now, which would connect Morrisville Parkway to Carpenter Fire Station Road.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
This has more to do with timing and whether we're going to have access to this site. I expect that collector that is on our comprehensive transportation plan probably is some point in time in the future. Would the part of that is on this parcel be required to be constructed with development of this property?
Absolutely.
So we're going to end up with a little piece of road with connecting to nothing, right?
It will be for a time being. As that's pretty consistent with almost all our stub streets that we have for connectivity. But it does set itself up to, as adjacent properties develop, that we'll have that continuation going forward.
I guess my second question then is, assuming that this develops in the near term, I believe then the assumption would be that the only way to get to it is going to be Indian Wells Road.
There currently now is the only way is Indian Wells Road. Now there is also, as Mr. Shaw had said, there's some activity going on. Currently right now there's another development right at the sharp curve of Wakena Drive. Immediately to the east there's a development there of Highcroft that is being constructed right now. That actually has an interconnected way to get down to Morrisville Parkway, which is also under construction right now. So there actually would be 2 forms of access.
Can you show us where that connection would be, just with your mouse?
Let's see if I can get that. The development's being under constructed right now is located in this area right here. And they have here's Morrisville Parkway down here. There is a connected road that connects over to Wakena Road, so that would be another form of access that could be in that neighborhood.
What I'm really trying to get at is, are we likely to see a situation where this parcel develops with only one access? road access for a while until we get development of that road on the west side of the parcel.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that could be, you know, we do have an ordinance that talks about, you know, developments, residential developments that are over 100 units must have at least two forms of access from two separate streets. That would certainly be a site plan issue that would come up if we didn't feel like there was a confidence enough that they would have that second access point. So that would have to be something that would be looked at during site plan, absolutely.
So the, going Wakena Road down to Morrisville Parkway, that would be cut through on a neighborhood, which would certainly serve emergency vehicles and all, but as far as daily commuting traffic would be
Absolutely.
a problem.
They actually size the roads in here for a major local road that goes through here. It's not a direct road to Morrisville Parkway, but it can get you to Morrisville Parkway, yes. But I think in the long-range plan was that the collector road of Highcroft Drive was going to be the major collector distributor road in that area that would get you to and from the thoroughfares. So the cut-through traffic probably in this area, even though they may experience it for a time being until this road's built, it certainly has an opportunity for secondary emergency access and connectivity in the short term.
Now, aside from the emergency access, as far as being, you know, commuting type regular traffic, to get access to Carpenter Fire Station Road, that would mean the property that's where its site is on the existing side, the black on white site,
Right here?
that would have to be developed.
That is correct.
And
And I believe Cameron Pond, I think in their last phase, or one of their last phases, the roadway is already planned, or may actually be built right now. The road actually extends to here, so there would be a gap if this were developed. There would be a gap still between those two properties.
until that's developed.
Yeah.
And same thing below the site.
Yes, exactly.
From all the way down to Morrisville Parkway
That's correct.
would depend upon a number of pieces of property being developed.
That is correct.
Until each one of them is developed, it won't be a continuous open road.
That's right. And that's traditionally how our major collector roads are being built. They're being borne by the responsibilities of the development community as they develop property.
Other questions? Mr. Evangelista?
Half question, half observation. When you were mentioning the gradient, if you will, from west to east of density, where it's going to be much more open space and the like in the western part, and as we get further in the eastern part of this parcel, I believe the applicant said it's congruent with the overall flow of larger lots or less density into the west, all the way over to 55, where it's much higher density. Yet in between, there's a substantial area of undeveloped land yet, and I'm just trying to get this gradient, trying to reconcile that with not pigeonholing that other area of property in between, such that any gradient sort of, I don't want to be back here a couple of years later saying, well, they can't do this or that in a density because we've got this gradient already established. And I'm just curious about that. And I'm not sure it's even a question as much as something that I can't quite reconcile.
Would the applicant like to, because I think we could use a little clarification on this gradient discussion.
Well, I'm not sure I completely understood if there was a question there, but let me try to point out a couple of things. First of all, as Jerry mentioned, to address the transportation issue, he is right. This road has been cleared and is under construction to that point right there. We, as a part of our analysis, our development analysis, we're looking at how that alignment would come down through this property and then also have to cross that open space designation that you saw on the previous site plan. But the second thing, I think if you're asking about a gradient, I'm just, from a planning standpoint, I look at where should the higher density be? And to me, the higher density should be along the more heavily traveled roadways, the easier points of access. And again, which is why, even though this entire area is designated as medium density residential, we feel, again, looking at not only this stream, but there's another stream that comes down along here. So this is really almost at a peninsula of upland area here. And to try to force some townhomes or that higher density 8-unit to the acre residential, we felt was inappropriate in respect, again, to the natural features there. So when I talk about a transition, I'm not trying to set what somebody else might do on their property. I'm just from good planning and looking at this area as a whole, it seems to me that, the townhomes or that 8-unit to the acre use would be more appropriate closer to Highway 55 with the lower density that we're proposing, the 3-unit to the acre, being in this more sensitive environmental area. I don't know if that addressed your...
That's very good, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Not seeing any, I'll take a motion.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The last speaker, Mr. Notkin, mentioned an email, he just handed it to me. Is that something I can pass to you? Since he did.
You have a copy for each one of us?
I have one copy.
What does the email pertain to? The problem is we're going to have to pass it along the board, and each one of us is going to have to read it and absorb it because we don't have copies.
Looking for direction, do I pass it to you or do I just accept it?
What do you think? Do you want to see this email? Do we need to see this email?
I don't think it's
I think we heard from the
This,
speaker.
this was in, if I understand correctly, this was in relation to the tree clearing that was not part of this, but for your information. So staff will be happy to forward this to you.
Yeah, if it be for our general background information, if it's something you could forward to me and go onto my desk for future reference.
Yeah,
Would
this-
you
this
forward
per-
it
This
all-
pertains to the tree clearing associated with the utility line easement. So while it is immediately adjacent and touches on some of the subject property, it's not germane to the rezoning case, but we'll certainly summarize this and share it with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, seeing no more questions, I'm going to ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to
Mr.
make a
Warner.
motion. I move that the board forward case number 13REZ-23 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans is reasonable and in the public interest for reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
We have a motion and a second?
I will second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman, my motion is based on the fact that this project appears to be a good transition from the Cameron Pond subdivision. It appears that the applicant has been very diligent in working with the Cameron Pond homeowners and have addressed some of their concerns. As far as the transition in the future, only who knows what that will be, but that's not before the board today. And for those reasons, I recommend that we move it forward with an approval.
Other comments?
Yes. I'm concerned about the amount of traffic that this would put on Indian Wells at NC 55 in particular, until such time in the future as that additional collector road is built, and it looks like that will be sometime in the future because it's dependent upon other properties being developed. I think we have a case here that's clearly a case of, I'm not sure how the best way to put it, but the cumulative impact of multiple developments. This Indian Wells development has, I believe, 95, projected 95 trips generated in the evening, 5 short of requiring a traffic analysis. You add on to that the other development, you would certainly go over the 100 threshold, but no single development is large enough to require the traffic analysis report and traffic study. However, there have been 2 previous traffic studies which do shed some light on it. In particular, 11 TAR 323 done in 2011 for Highcroft Village, and the 13 TAR 372 done this past April for the Carpenter ACCP. Both of those show background, so that's not including the studies, the projects that they were, the studies were made for, but the background in 2015 and 2017 for eastbound Indian Wells Road is a level E. I believe that's not considered to be acceptable. That would be the eastbound approach of Indian Wells onto 55. And so on top of that background, we've added more than 100 cars, 100 trips per day, peak hour. We would make that even worse. And if it's already failing, we should not be making it worse. And then that's not including any additional development that might be along the Indian Wells. Yes, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment there and point out something. When you look at the land use plan and you look at the actual developable area here, and I realize we're getting into site plan issues, but if you look at the remaining land that's available for development there, the full 29 acres isn't going to come close to being developed. It's more like 20 of the acres. So we're actually not looking at increasing above the 100 trips. It's actually looking like it's more about 60 dwelling units that will end up there. I just wanted to make that clarification when you look at the requirement for the open space and parkland there on the open space.
Yeah, thank you. So that would, reduce just, from this particular site on this particular project, but we also have the site on Wakena Road, and we have the sites that are yet to be developed, but probably will be. And nothing is planned right now for the Indian Wells approach to Highway 55. There are other things on Highway 55, but probably would not affect this level of service of E on that approach. Plus the traffic in general on Highway 55, we're adding to that presumably a large portion, nobody knows how much, but some part of the trips will go north or south on 55. We're adding to 55, which is already a problem and already heavily traveled. And so for those reasons, I oppose this.
Other comments? Just, Ms. Muir.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I knew you were in the queue.
That's all right. I'm looking over the criteria for consideration and reviewing these rezonings. And the proposed rezoning is unlikely to have significant adverse impacts on the natural environment, including air, water, noise, stormwater management, wildlife, and vegetation. I definitely feel like it meets that threshold. Each landowner comes to us for rezoning their property, and we just don't have a crystal ball for when the person to the north or south is going to do theirs, but we've got great things in place like the comprehensive transportation plan that set forward our ability to make sure that when that development comes to the south, the transportation infrastructure supports it. So Indian Wells, I feel like Indian Wells can support this particular parcel, and by the time everything that builds out and you have that cumulative effect, the comprehensive transportation plan is set forth to make sure that you've got the infrastructure to make sure all of those issues are dealt with. So is there going to temporarily be some more traffic on Indian Wells? Definitely. But has the town kind of had the foresight to put things in place to keep that from getting out of control when everything else develops alongside of it? Definitely to my satisfaction.
But John, you make some good points that we've struggled with this cumulative impact question in the past, and one of the liabilities we have when we have a comprehensive transportation plan that we update every 6 years, 6, 7 years. And I think we're really updating it again with the Imagine Cary process, right? So we'll get an update, but maybe the message here is it would be nice to have a process that allows us to a little bit more dynamically adjust the comprehensive transportation plan based upon progress that is made between major updates. And I'm not sure what that means, but I wanted to say that because it's a suggestion I'd love to make to the town council when I present this. So,
Hope you will make that.
and I probably will make that comment. Mr. Miller.
I'll just say I agree with Mr. Werner's earlier observations and commend the applicant and the Cameron Pond neighborhood for working together to come up with what seems to be a reasonable density and a reasonable additional open space dedication that appears to have met with the satisfaction of the neighbors. And although I certainly acknowledge that there will be some temporary traffic issues, as Ms. Muir pointed out, it's looking at this from a rezoning perspective, I think it is reasonable and consistent with our plans.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, please. Just real quick, I think this meets all criteria. I think we've actually belabored this longer than need be. It's a yes in my book. But the point I would like to bring up is I'd like to commend the Cameron Pond and the developer. It's so refreshing to see a neighborhood and a developer come here, support each other, look at the big picture. You can't always get what you want. One individual came here and I love this, and you can't control the clearing of other people's trees. Thank you for understanding a very practical, tough realization. I mean, we get a lot of people that come here and will argue for trees on somebody else's property. So I know this was difficult, but I commend you all. And this case and your cooperation has made my day. So thank you.
You can tell we're planning geeks when our days are made in such a way. Okay, seeing no more comments, I'm going to call this for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, that motion carries 8-1. And we're going to move on to our next public hearing, which is 13 REZ 24, the Marquee Homes property at Pettard Sears Road. And Ms. Grannon, you're with us again, right?
Thank you. This is a request to rezone approximately 1.46 acres located at the intersection of O'Kelly Chapel Road and Pittard Sears Road. An aerial view shows the subject property is currently vacant. The land use plan designation is medium-density residential. The existing zoning is residential 40. The property is also located in the joint Chatham-Cary land use plan, and Chatham County's Planning Department has been notified of this request. The proposed zoning is residential 8, conditional use. Conditions presented by the applicant at the Town Council public hearing would limit the use to detached residential and a maximum of 3 lots. Property owners within 400 feet of the subject property were notified by mail. The property was posted and advertised. There were no protest petitions or inquiries. There were no speakers at the Town Council public hearing other than the applicant. Additional zoning conditions offered by the applicant would be to offer a 50-foot wide Type B semi-opaque streetscape if the property is developed as an exempt subdivision. Property that's subdivided on 2 acres or less with less than 3 lots or less is exempt from Cary's subdivision ordinance regulations, and the applicant offered this condition to guarantee a 50-foot streetscape along O'Kelly Chapel Road. If the property becomes assembled into a larger land area, this would be a requirement. So that's why the language on there, if developed as an exempt subdivision. The site is not impacted by any stream buffers or floodways according to Cary's GIS maps. And there is a future street side trail shown along O'Kelly Chapel Road. Well, again, if developed as an exempt subdivision, the applicant would not be required for construction of this trail. They have already dedicated an 8-foot wide greenway easement in this vicinity, and that has been recorded. O'Kelly Chapel Road is designated as a thoroughfare. And this concludes staff's presentation. I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward, and then I'll be available for your comments and questions after the public hearing.
Thank you. And at this point, I will open the public hearing, and we will begin with our applicant.
Thank you. Glenda Top with Glenda Top and Associates. I'm here representing the property owner, Tom Hakens, who is a local builder. As Deborah pointed out, and I'm not going to add much to this one either, it's a very small piece of property. Mr. Hankins, who owns the property, envisions 3 lots. And again, it's not a zoning condition, but he will be building the lots. It does comply with the joint Chatham County Cary plan. Actually, the density is much lower than what was approved with the joint plan. It is surrounded by, across the street is the Carolina Preserve, the Pulte development, and the MDR was a recently approved rezoning. This piece of property, for various reasons, was not included in that piece, so Mr. Hankins still owns it. A part of it, as Deborah pointed out, has been given for a right-of-way for the road and, of course, for the greenway easement, and what he envisions here is to build 3 homes. And we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to address us during this public hearing? Anyone at all? Saying no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and open this case up for questions.
Just a clarification question. If I understand correctly, because this lot is small, it would by itself be what you called an exempt subdivision, and what the applicant has proposed is streetscape and right-of-way dedication for the trail that they wouldn't otherwise need to supply, but are offering
Right.
As if it were not an exempt. Is that
Right-of-way dedication and easement for the greenway were already provided a few years ago.
And the streetscape?
But the streetscape is a zoning condition that they offered voluntarily.
And those would be equivalent to, if it had been a larger lot, those would have been
The
required?
streetscape's proposed to be a type B, which is semi-opaque.
Right.
If they were to do an assemblage with this property and have it be part of a larger subdivision, it would be a requirement for an opaque streetscape, a type A streetscape. And so that would be the only difference there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
As far as roadway improvements, are they part of this?
Not if it's developed as an exempt subdivision. They would not be required to make roadway improvements.
Now, O'Kelly Chapel Road is currently considered to be a thoroughfare,
It is a thoroughfare, correct?
and would that eventually be 2 lanes in each direction?
The future section on O'Kelly Chapel Road is 4-lane with a landscape median, and the ultimate right-of-way, 100-foot right-of-way. So it's currently 2 lanes.
Currently, 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, and will be. Has that been funded in any way? Who's paying to improve that?
There is no funding currently.
Okay. So someday in the future, when we get money, we'll increase it, but nothing's planned right now. Okay, that's all I have.
I've got a question.
Mr. Rogers.
The site to the west is currently being developed? And
Correct.
what was the density on that? Did that get mentioned or not?
That has a maximum density of 6 dwelling units per acre under transitional residential. I believe, I don't have what the condition was for that property. Do you remember that? I think Mrs. Top actually worked on that case.
Deborah's right about the density. It was single-family detached, age-restricted. community is what the EPCON community that did the rezoning, that's what it was approved for, but it is single-family detached.
20-foot buffer on that eastern side of that property?
Yes, there's the, yes, there is a buffer. They were required to give a buffer, but I can't remember what it,
Well, they were required to put in a 50-foot streetscape, but then there was also a buffer requirement for their half of a buffer between two. Yeah, if they're both developed at lots that are 8,000 square feet or greater in size, then there's no buffer requirement, there's a landscape strip. But with the smaller lots adjacent to larger lots, then they would have a buffer requirement.
they gave, like Deborah said, they gave one on their side.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the street improvements. I expect that we probably had some street improvements that were required for the community to the east. So Kelly Chapel Road to the east of this parcel, have those road improvements been made?
Have they been made?
Yes.
On this, yes, on this side of the street, yes.
I thought so. I was trying to remember. It's been a while since I've drove it. So, and the site to the west is going to have...
Not been developed yet, correct?
It's not developed yet, but it's going to do road improvements.
They'll
Gonna
be
have-
responsible for road improvements on their frontage, on their side of the street.
So here's my concern. We have a really nice improved road on one side of this parcel and a nice improved road on the other side of the parcel, and this parcel isn't required to improve the road. So we basically have this little funnel that is in front of this parcel, and the only way we fix it is for the town to. Is that what we're kind of looking at here? Okay.
We have a similar situation further on down the road where it narrows into 2 lanes and no one is funding any improvement on it.
This isn't the first time we've seen this problem. It's pretty common.
See that quite a bit.
It's a little frustrating. There's not much we can do about it other than as we develop our revision of the comprehensive transportation plan, we can look at situations like this as higher priority requirements, because it just looks so dumb when you have a very short stretch where you don't have improved roads. And so that's another, I'm saying this because it's another thing I'd love to say to the town council.
I hope you will, and putting it on the CTP is a step in the right direction, but that's just paper, not pavement. And before anybody drives on it, it takes money.
Well, I also said prioritization.
Yeah.
We're never going to have enough money to do everything we want to do in our CTP. So when you have situations like this, they beg for some sort of prioritization. And so I'll make the point for us.
Good. Appreciate it.
If there are no other comments, can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You sure?
You spoke
Okay.
first.
All right. I'll make a motion that we forward 13 REZ 24 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and amendments.
We have a motion. Your hand was up, Mr. Warner. Okay. We have a motion and a second discussion.
I just want to get in the record, I agree, the little road issue as far as fixing on one side, not fixing on the other, or an exempt piece of property here. I mean, the town of Cary, we do great meetings and conferences and work sessions, and we're always planning. It's not that hard. Let's find a way to fix this little loophole and move forward. Thanks.
I have it in my notes, and trust me, I'll make an issue out of it.
Should be an easy fix.
I'll just quickly say I appreciate the applicant's conditions to go above and beyond what's required for the exempt subdivision. It certainly improves the case.
Absolutely. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And we will move on to our last case of the evening. This is a case without a public hearing. This is 13 REZ 20 Pollard Harris at Stevenson Road. Ms. Bierman.
Good evening. This is a request to apply initial Town of Cary zoning to about 19.39 acres on Stevenson Road. Here's the vicinity map. You can see the site is located on the east side of Stevenson Road. It's about 400 feet east of Smith Road. This is just a closer aerial view of the property. The existing zoning is Wake County Residential 30. And you can see the dotted line shows the boundary between Cary's planning jurisdiction and the Apex ETJ. The proposed zoning is R8 conditional use. There's one zoning condition proposed that would limit any residential development to a maximum of 2.75 units per acre. The land use plan calls for the property to be developed for low-density residential, which is 1 to 3 units per acre. There is a stream buffer shown on Cary's GIS maps. This feature would be field determined at the time of the site plan review. According to the Cary's Parks and Greenways plans, there are no greenway or park facilities in the vicinity. Stevenson Road is designated on the Comprehensive Transportation Plan as a minor thoroughfare. There is a future C-Trans route along 1010 and Kildare Farm Road that's just to the accessible north of the site. This is a notification map showing properties that were notified of the public hearing. At the public hearing, there were no citizen comments, no citizen speakers, and there were no comments from council members at the public hearing. And with that, I would call on the applicant to see if there are any additional comments he may have.
Good evening, Chairman and board members. I'm J.W. Sharon with IDS. This case is one of the unique cases, I believe, of late where we have a request that pretty much meets every intent of the plan from the town of Cary, from the comprehensive side of things, as well as working with the adjacent property owners. We had a meeting in August of this year. We had 7 residents attend from the community here you see to the south with Allenhurst Place. Their comments were related to buffering and access. We felt when they left that meeting that they were in support of this request. Thus, as we've moved forward, you haven't seen anyone protest or oppose it. We've also put that cap in there of 2.75 units per acre to ensure we have compliance with the LDR designation. We feel this is a perfect fit for this area, and this density represents appropriate densities around this tract, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
I have one. Regarding the buffer, what is the buffer requirement between this tract and the one to the east, based on those zonings to you?
The one to the east is, that's an existing multifamily development. That would be a 40-foot type A buffer.
Sounds right. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question on the street, Stevenson Road. If I'm looking at the map that you have up, is Stevenson Road the edge of the ETJ?
Yes, it is.
So that dotted line that goes
The
down?
dotted line on, this is on the Apex side, this is Apex, the
Okay.
Apex ETJ in this area.
Sure. So, and it looks like the dotted line is on the eastern side. So Stevenson Road, whose jurisdiction, I mean, who has maintenance requirements or responsibility for Stevenson? Is that a town of Cary? Is that a Apex? Is that a county road? Because right now it looks like the only access to this, which will ultimately be annexed into the town of Cary at some point, is through a road. So, you know, we talk about a lot of traffic, but now we're pushing traffic onto somebody else's road. So whose road is Stevenson Road?
As I believe Stevenson would be a DOT,
Okay.
DOT road.
Okay, thanks.
I think you make a very good point, that the single point of access based upon, we almost have sort of like a very large flag lot here. The single point of access is going to be on Stevenson Road, and I think we all have considerable experience in how DOT prioritizes road improvement projects in this area, which would suggest that we're not going to see an awful lot of improvements from DOT. And so we have one of these situations where we could have traffic impacts, but we have very little ability to even ask for mitigation, because the road in question is actually not in Cary.
And I mean, I look at this also as just a larger philosophical annexation issue. You know, if the town of Cary is going to annex property, that property should be accessed from some sort of town of Cary access point. I mean, right now, we're just loading on the back end and sending everything else out in somebody else's jurisdiction.
Can I make a point about this proposal, though? This looks like 2.7 dwelling units an acre instead of 5.4 dwelling units an acre. So we would be reducing the load on Stevenson compared to what we actually have in place.
I'd like to go back and make a point I made on a previous case, and that is that just because we've drawn some lines on a map that says this is Apex or this is Cary, doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to work together with those communities to make sure that we have some sort of coordinated plan to keep bad things from happening. This is a real good case where I would think that we ought to be talking to Apex Planning, telling them what's up here, and at least give them the opportunity to pipe in if they have some anxiety or concerns. Now, I appreciate that that isn't necessarily something we can load into a zoning condition, but I think we have a responsibility to at least talk to their planning department, let them know what's up, and see if they have any creative ideas.
And we did mail notification to Apex.
We did. Did
Yes.
anybody talk to them?
I did have a conversation with the staff, actually asking about other Apex development in the area in case there were questions about that, and did let them know, in the course of that we were looking at, property in this area as well, and didn't receive any feedback or comment.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Is there any access available from the parcel to the east of there?
That's developed for a multifamily development currently, so there would not be any public access through that property. I would say with the development, when the subdivision plan is looked at, it would be looked at for connectivity issues as well for the adjacent portions through this area. So those are layout issues that would come up at that time, and it certainly sets up the possibility at some point when this portion is developed, which is what actually has the road frontage to look at the potential for interconnectivity that would be in accordance with the requirements of the subdivision regulations.
Thank you.
So you just brought another question to mind. Since Stevenson Road is not in our comprehensive transportation plan, we don't...
Well, it is. It's designated as a minor thoroughfare on our comprehensive transportation plan.
Oh, it is. So we do have some idea what sort of road improvements we would require.
Yes, actually, the designation in the CTP for that would be to go to a, currently it's 2 lanes within a 60-foot right-of-way. The comprehensive transportation plan calls for 3 lanes within a 70-foot right-of-way. So the frontage, the improvements along the frontage would be required to meet that, regardless of if it's of where the boundary line falls in relation to the road itself.
And so these parcels would be responsible for half of that, right?
Yes.
And what happens on the other side of the road is Apex.
And we can certainly look to, presumably with the with the comprehensive transportation plan, I would assume there was some coordination made at that time, but that's something we could certainly look closer
You
into.
know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'm going to call this, well, wait a second, we need a motion.
Yeah.
We can't vote on something until we so move it. Do we have a motion? Mr. Warner?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward case number 13 REZ 20 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Rogers, or, I think somebody down here was in first.
I second, but I think
Because
Mr. Rogers was first.
Ms. Best, you haven't had one yet tonight, so I'm going to give that one to you.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And I believe that's our last item of business tonight, and so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Warner moves to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously.
You've got to say no.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.